Welcome to The Counselor's Chair, a podcast brought to you by Traverse Counseling Services. Join us as we explore all things human, mental health, psychology, philosophy, and a few extras. Be sure to check us out on all forms of social media and visit our YouTube channel at The Counselor's Chair. Hello, listeners, and thanks for joining us today. It's our pleasure to have Dr. Chrissy Logue on the show. For those of you who don't know Dr. Logue, you're in for a real treat with this episode. She's a clinical psychologist with a PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and is currently practicing with L+C Psychological Services in Florence, Kentucky. In today's episode, we will be covering female empowerment and more specifically how societal pressures weigh on and influence female roles in society. Chrissy, as I referred to her during the episode, was a professor for both Andrew and I in grad school, and she was my mentor and clinical supervisor during my post-grad experience. She's been a great friend, and I owe much of the beginning of my clinical career to her incredible mentorship. Seriously, she's one of the most caring and competent people I've ever come across, and her thoughts are incredibly enlightening. So, without further ado, here is our episode with Dr. Chrissy Logue. Chrissy, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's a really an awesome opportunity to have you here. We really appreciate you carving out the time for this, and I'm really excited to hear your insights and your perspective. It's always been very deep and enlightening for both Andrew and I. Mm-hmm. And so we're just super pumped to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. What an honor just to get to be a part of all the success and the growth that you guys have accomplished. It's pretty amazing to be able to be a part of your empire now. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, and it's kind of like a shared empire too, right? I was thinking earlier today, it feels really good personally to have you on here because I feel like the real launch of my career started in your office in our supervision, so it's like something really gratifying and really special to have you on here and to contribute in this way. But really it's a shared success, I think. That's all the feels.
That's really, it's really cool to hear you say that, just because students like the two of you, I feel like I actually saw that success burgeoning, in the eyes of undergrads, or, even I remember exactly where you sat, Josh, in that human sexuality class in the back, in the corner with your head down, acting like you weren't interested. But I was like, I know there is something special. I know he's actually more interested than he's acting right now. So I saw the potential, and it's really cool to have that little bit of fortune telling ability.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you saw what was in there and empowered me. And I think with what we're talking about today being women's empowerment as an overall topic, but with things like assertiveness and gender power differentials and sexuality as sort of subtopics under that, I think it's just really cool that on the front end I can say that you have sort of transcended the sexes as well as like been a mentor and been empowering to men around you as well. So I think it's really, for anybody listening, I think it's really important, especially with where gender topics are today. It's really important for anybody listening, male, female, to know that Chrissy actually empowers the men around her as well, in some really helpful ways. I mean, like I said, I feel like it all started in your office with supervision. So it's definitely cool stuff. And
that's probably a really good place to start, just as a bottom line, because oftentimes people will immediately turn off a conversation about women's issues or feminism or whatever label, just because they immediately feel excluded if it's not the identity that they have, or even women feel like that it's an extreme perspective, and that just really couldn't be further from the truth. I think at least my own philosophy on all of these issues is, how can we make everyone better? How can we make everyone's lives better? How can we make the world a better place? It's not about elevating any group over another. In fact, that's actually the opposite of what my, personal mission is about, is to elevate everybody. And it's more fair for everyone when gender roles are discussed and people are aware of dynamics and institutions are questioned, all the stuff that we're going to talk about, it's better for everybody. So I'm glad you
Absolutely.
felt that personally.
Yes, I definitely felt it personally, and I appreciate you saying that too. It's such an awesome personal mission to have, that type of unity and bringing people together and empowering humanity at that point. So that's awesome, Chrissy. And I guess maybe a good starting spot is, what are some of the larger issues that you feel like women face in modern culture, whether that's in the workplace, family, friendships, marriage, sexuality, so forth? What are some of the things that you feel like stand out right now in our culture?
Yeah, I think the thing that just immediately jumps out to me, especially as I think about my current caseload, like literally the women that are in my office every day, it's just the superwoman, octopus arms, end all be all, how whatever kind of terminology you want to put on these unrealistic expectations that we're placing on ourselves. And it's both internal, it's external, it's in the workplace, it's in the family, it's in body image. I mean, it's like all of those things that you just listed out in relationships and sexuality. They're unrealistic, completely just outlandish expectations. And I'm just as guilty of it as everyone else. I mean, I want to be perfect. I want to have it all together. I want my house to be clean. I want to be sure I get the workout in and don't eat too many carbs. And like, oh my gosh, the list just goes on and on and on. And all that's good stuff. And that's where I think, as therapists, especially, as if we immediately kind of swoop in and just try to bulldoze some of those ideals and expectations, then you'll get a lot of pushback because I'll be the first one to start pushing back. Like, no, I want all that. I don't want to become a slouch and a couch potato and a loser and not pay my bills and have my kids going off the rails. I mean, of course I don't want any of those bad things to happen. So we can't just go in and bulldoze all of that. But I think somehow very slowly and carefully, we have to start challenging what I call the internal drill sergeant. Um, again, I think so many people are afraid that they're going to go to the other extreme. And granted, I'm sure there's some people on the other extreme, but just the majority of people I deal with, and looking at my own life, we all have this internal drill sergeant that is just like cracking the whip 24/7 about everything. And so there's just no way we can ever live up. There's no possible way we can ever live up. So we always feel defeated. We feel not good enough, self-hatred. And then once you start feeling those things, then the vicious cycle just starts over and over. Then things start slipping. Then, you start forgetting things. Then you start burning the meal, and then you feel worse, right? So it's just the internal drill sergeant cracks that whip and keeps that vicious cycle going, going, going until we finally become clinically depressed or relationally dysfunctional, whatever the manifest, or, a severe eating disorder, whatever it manifests. Oh, and then the world's like, oh, see, look how crazy you are. So it's like,
Yeah.
how could I not
Yes.
be crazy under these circumstances?
Yeah. It's almost like it's what you're saying. I really like it. It's like these things that you're pursuing aren't necessarily bad things, but it's almost like that perfection as an expectation is the thing that's been inserted that becomes problematic. It's like, I must do my workout perfectly. My body must be perfect. The expectation is perfect. And so it really...
It's the perfection piece and the competition piece. And I think maybe social media and just kind of modern living has really driven that point home, that we used to maybe have this sort of magazine ideal of perfect. Well, now it's just, it's the Instagram, I got to keep up with, because it's not just the models who look perfect. It's my next door neighbor who has gorgeous pictures of herself in a bikini at the beach. And I'm like, dang, how does she do it? And then she drives up in her Lexus, and then that's on social media too. It's like, well, what am I doing wrong? And, then you see her kids posing for their pictures with their matching, I don't know, what's the Lily Pulitzer outfits, whatever, and it's just like never ending. So there's so many more avenues for comparison and competition. And yes, definitely the perfection, I think, still fuels all of that.
Yes.
But it's like we cannot escape comparison and competition no matter where you turn.
Wow. I mean, I think that that becomes that becomes certainly a driving force, because as I guess especially when you see someone else that emulates whatever the highest standard is, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like you're kind of hitting that higher standard. It's like keeping up with the Joneses kind of
Yep.
perspective. Sheryl Sandberg talked about this a little bit in Lean In, from a female perspective, that sometimes female competition, and maybe that's what you're talking about, but like that sometimes that female competition knocks the empowerment out of the female movement. Is that kind of what you're hitting on there as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely that kind of old school, middle school, high school sort of backbiting, like,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's not quite as simple as people make it out to be. I don't think it's that, we're so jealous and, we're doing that middle school, high school thing. I think it's literally we're so beat down by this survival of the fittest that I don't
Yes.
think anybody really sets out to, like, how can I tear down my sisters because
Hmm.
um because I'm not good enough. I think it's just we're in this like jungle of, bombarded with expectations, both again internally and externally. And so I think it's just this welcome to the jungle, like, chaotic survival of the fittest that then ends up looking like backbiting and,
Yes.
female competition and gossip and things like that, when really it's classic crazy making. It's almost
Mm-hmm.
like gaslighting, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like the environment is so crazy making, and so then I mean, I have people tell me all the time, "Oh, I work with a bunch of women and there's all this drama." I'm like, "Well, try living their life
Yeah.
and see how you would feel in the workplace."
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that too, with that clarification, because I think what Cheryl brought up in that book and the example that you just gave, men typically take that as like cat fighting, right? But
Mhm.
I think you're bringing in a really important part here, which is there's a cultural madness almost,
Yes. That's a good
that
way to put it.
yeah. Yes, I'm really glad you clarified that, because I've heard that message like that twisted in a way that that females just get discarded.
Mhm.
That's like, oh, they're just going to fight with themselves. They're just going to compete with one another and discount.
Mhm.
So I'm really glad you clarified that.
the
Yeah.
cattiness, the
Yeah.
cattiness and the pettiness and the jealousy. I think that's just another way to both devalidate our feelings,
Hmm.
but also completely fail to recognize the vomit that we cleaned off our shirt on the way to work while we had a fight with our husband because we asked him to unload the dishwasher and all the dirty dishes still sat there. And
Hmm.
then we tripped over 4 toys on the way out the door and realized halfway down the street we had on 2 different shoes because,
Yep.
that scenario. And so then you get to work. Well, yeah, I might look a little catty at that point, or I might look a little emotionally unstable at that
Yes.
point. But who wouldn't under those circumstances?
Oh, absolutely. I know I would.
Me
Hmm.
too.
Yeah.
And then, I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but it
Oh, go for it.
reminds me of such a super important point that I just read about the other day, and it's the idea of mental load.
Hmm.
It's becoming easier, I think, to quantify. People can do the studies and be like, okay, what percentage of the income do you make? What percentage of the home of the what percentage of the hours do you work outside the home? And then what percentage of the chores inside the home? And we're seeing those numbers start to even out, right? So,
Mhm.
if the man and the woman both work 50% outside the home, maybe they have relatively equal incomes, then they're starting, it's not completely equal, but in studies, it's starting to get closer to equal childcare in terms of hours put in,
Hmm.
equal chores in terms of like actual laundry list of things to do. But what is unquantifiable or less easy to quantify is the mental load. Who remembers
Hmm.
that it's time for the dental cleanings every six
Hmm.
months? Whose
Hmm.
calendar is the athletic practice on? When
Hmm.
there's an interruption in the schedule, whose responsibility is it to rearrange the carpool and to make sure there's something in the refrigerator so that people don't eat Cheetos for dinner, right? It's that kind of stuff that is the mental load. And I'm at 1,000,000% guilty of it in my own household because it's control. Like,
Hmm.
you know, my daughter's appointments are on my calendar, not my husband's.
Mm.
You know, the
Mm-hmm.
change the AC filter, that's on my calendar.
Mm-hmm.
All that, I get it. I'm a control freak. And so that's why that stuff, I don't necessarily readily let that go, but it is absolutely draining. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not just the physical, literal laundry list of things that I think is the crazy making, and that we have all these expectations because we want to do all that right. But it's that mental load. Who is the one thinking in the middle of the night, like, oh, did I sign that permission slip? Does she have the $2 for Kona Ice tomorrow? Crap, I don't have $2 because I only have a 10. Wait, do I have that 10? No, I spent that 10, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's the stuff that is going through many women's heads. And so no wonder we look depressed or, whatever. And no wonder we're not living up to the unrealistic expectations, because now I feel like a horrible mother because my daughter's going to be the only one who doesn't have Kona Ice at the field trip tomorrow because I didn't have the change, because I didn't have the cash,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's a day-to-day just excruciating drain on the brain when we're already trying to be superwoman and, do it all perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Man. Yeah, when you phrase it like that,
I need a Xanax.
Yeah,
yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when you put it like that, Chrissy, it's it sounds like a very anxious headspace, right?
Yes.
A lot of things to remember, a lot of things to live up to. But then, at hearing that myself, I feel like, in my own marriage, I feel like my wife remembers far more of those things than I do, or is thinking about those things more than I am. So I'm sitting here thinking, man, I need to pick up some of these things. But I guess from that perspective, though, and that's what I really like about what you're already bringing to the table is from that perspective. And as a male, when I hear that, I'm like, okay, that is if my wife is carrying all that in her own mind, I really want to participate in it. Like, I really want to shoulder some of that. Like, how do we split those things,
Absolutely. And it takes very conscious, very gentle negotiation of that, because I can't sit here and blame my husband for doing that, because I'm just as guilty for setting up this dynamic. But you're right. Then after it gets set up without conscious intervention and renegotiation, I can't tell you how many people say, oh, I asked this guy at dance the other day something about his daughter was having their tonsils out, and my daughter had her tonsils out. And I was like, oh, who did your daughter's surgery? He goes, oh, I don't, he looked at me like I would have said, you got 3 heads on. He was like, I have no idea. My wife handles all that. I'm like, you seriously don't know the name of the physician who operated on your daughter? Like, really?
Wow.
But I don't think my husband would know that either, which is not a bad thing. Like, it's just, I think it's like you said, Josh, it's just, I didn't really think about it. She's just natural. She just remembers all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, she's remembering all this stuff because she has to. Mm-hmm. And that's just the unspoken dynamic that has been set up. Nobody's the bad guy. Nobody did it on purpose. But this is what makes us crazy. And let's, get real here. If I can just kind of take it from G to PG-13.
Go for it.
And then you wonder why we're not so interested in like having a ton of sex. It's like, you know what? I'm exhausted. Like, I'm exhausted. And so then it goes right back into so many of those issues. So now it's our sexuality. Now it's our marriage. Now it's our communication. Because if we say we're exhausted, we don't really want to go into all of that. And so now the guy's taking it personally, like, oh, you're so cold. You're so unloving. Oh gosh. And then how many people in my practice are having affairs? Like, oh my gosh, everybody's having an affair. Like, if another person sits down today and is talking about their affair, my head's going to pop off. But like, why? It's a no-brainer. Why are these things happening? Well, because we're living unrealistic lives.
Wow.
And of course, the girlfriend, of course, she's available and warm and cozy and, interesting and spicy because she's not worried about Kona Ice at 3:00 in the morning.
Oh, I mean, I was literally thinking that as you were talking. When I step into that headspace, even just as we're talking, it's like, man, that's exhausting. Like, who would want to have sex at that point in time? Or
absolutely,
like when everything is turned off, when everybody's asleep, when the world is shutting down and the expectations are starting to slow, it's like you probably just want to go to bed at that point.
Absolutely.
Not a lot of emotional energy or even physical energy to give at that point.
That's right. That's right. And it's not personal, but of course it feels personal,
Yes.
you know, to the other party involved. I had a friend of mine, maybe you've heard this story, but I couldn't remember if it was personal or something she heard, but basically where, you know, it was the dad's turn to close everybody down and put everybody to bed. And somehow he bathed the baby, got the baby to bed, but forgot to put a diaper on the baby. Okay. So, you know, the baby didn't die, whatever, like just slept the night without a diaper, I guess.
Right.
And this person told the story and and my friend and me, we're all having this conversation. We're like, okay, it's not the fact that he forgot to put the diaper on the baby. Like, whatever, mistakes happen. We all have sleep deprived, foggy brain. It's what would it be like to have a brain that would let me forget to put the diaper on the baby? Like, that is what's so mind-boggling.
Yes.
And I almost am jealous. Not that I would want to make that mistake, but the three of us were almost like, I would love to have a brain that it was even capable of letting me forget to put the diaper on the baby, because that would never happen. Not in a million years.
Right. Oh, man.
It's like the mentality of like, oh, it'll be okay. It'll work itself out, which I think is a world that a lot of men live in. I know I live in that world. It's like, oh, it'll be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. And what a great example, because that is something that I think people kind of throw up as, you know, why can't you be more like this? Well, it's the role of culture and oppression that, you know, oh, you're Black. Why are you so angry? Well, if you were living in this skin, you might be angry too. Right. So I think it's real easy when you're, looking at things from a different angle to be like, oh, just, you know, don't worry about things.
Sure. Well, and it's certainly not helpful for anyone to say that. I mean, just from being a human, but also being in practice myself, like to tell somebody, oh, just lighten up, right?
Yeah.
But to let alone hear that from your husband or your partner, or even maybe one of your children, or if you're single, you hear that from your boss maybe, or from a professor, you know, it's, you know, that certainly is not an effective way of helping. Just lighten up, you know.
That's right. How much more powerful would it be to say to that person who looks a little stressed, maybe they're a little distracted, and maybe they're responding a little more emotionally, with a little more emotional ability than you think they should, instead of saying like, hey, what is your deal? Lighten up, chill out. Say, what can I do to lighten your load right now?
Hey, nice. Yeah.
Dr. Logue, one of the things that I run into regularly is, you know, generally the husband will, you know, be willing to, I mean, you know, they'll say, well, I'm here because, you know, she wants me to be, so I'll do whatever I need to do, right? Which is not the greatest message to start out with. But, you know, when they do, you know, attempt to pick up the slack, or, you know, do try to, you know, help the kids get ready for bed, or maybe get ready in the morning, you know, what I'm finding, it's not to the standard that it's been done in the past. And so there's still that disconnect. So there's almost like there's still the resentment of like, okay, yeah, so you helped with the laundry, great, but it also sat on the bed for 3 days. And
you didn't fold it correctly.
Right.
And you didn't use the dryer sheet. Oh, yeah.
Right.
I have a term for this.
Lay it on us.
Okay. So my term for this is boxing out. So, you know, now that I'm a Kentuckian, I'm highly versed in basketball. And in boxing out, you know, you literally throw your body in front of the person and you wrap your arms around them and push them back with your butt to keep them away from the goal, the goal or the ball, whatever. Yeah. And so I think this is what women do. And this is back to the issue of, this is not to blame. This is everybody has a role to play. Nobody's the bad guy here. Because the second that, you're right, Andrew, people do start to step up. You know, the other person in the equation says, okay, I'll put the kids to bed, or I'll do the laundry. We, or many of us, then swoop in and box out. Like, well, no, it's not going to be good enough, or you didn't do it my way, or whatever. Right. And so this is what I work with a lot of women on, is like, when you do start to get some of the changes that not only that you want, because if you just use the word want, it sounds like, you know, I want a bonbon, or I want a diamond ring, or I mean, this is not about want. This is a change you need. Yeah, this is a change that is best and healthiest for everyone. So this is not like your husband, you know, heaping luxury on you. But when you do start to see the changes that are better and healthier for everyone, you've got to fight the urge to box him out, because that will just make things worse. And also, not just boxing out, but it's also criticism.
Right.
And I have an explanation for that as well, too. We're not criticizing, I don't think, from a place of malicious intent. It's just that internal drill sergeant. We heap that criticism on ourselves.
Hmm.
So when guys try to swoop in and help, or do the things that we've been expecting ourselves to do, then of course that internal drill sergeant is going to jump on them too. Which is not good. It's not fair. It's not healthy. So we've all got to work on the dynamics that keep this system fueled. Such as the internal drill sergeant, both internally and externally, and the boxing out as well.
Yeah, and I can certainly see. I can certainly see. I mean, I just I'm just looking around. I mean, in my own marriage, but working with my clients, seeing my own daughter, hearing about issues from women who have a platform and can speak openly about women's issues in our culture. It's like I can certainly see that men. I think we have a good long way to go, especially when it comes to hierarchy, and when it comes to making sure from whatever position we're in it, that the women in our lives also have an equal opportunity at that through us, if that's it, especially if it's not available in other places. And I'd love to spend some time talking about what we as men can do holistically, not just in a marriage, but sort of a lens that we could look through from your perspective that would be helpful. And I guess before we jump to that, though, I'd really I'm really sticking with this idea that you talked about of like almost like the collective crazy, or the collective expectation on women, or that embodied expectation. Chrissy, from your perspective, what lens may be helpful for women, whether they're married, whether they're single, whether it's in the workplace? From your perspective, is there a general lens that they might be able to see this collective crazy from, in order to contend with it, in an empowered or sort of an assertive way? Like, how might this be viewed? And it may be your drill sergeant metaphor, but do you have anything as far as what would be helpful for how to view the world as a woman, or how to view your immediate world as a woman, that could potentially empower or provide more opportunity for assertion?
Yes, absolutely. So the first idea, I think, is that we have to learn that there is such a thing as a lens. So as therapists, that's maybe a huge duh for us, but I can't tell you how foundational that is for so many of my clients. And we may work several sessions. I do a lot of CBT, and instead of jumping right into, we got to start with the idea that there even is such a thing as a cognition, as a lens, as opposed to just gospel truth. And I don't really know what other way to say. And, I'll pick up my glasses and be like, it's possible that I would have worn these glasses for so many years that I forget they're on my face. And so I just think this is how the world is. And it's just good old fashioned awareness for so many women, so many people. We live our lives so unaware, so not self-aware. We don't look at the dynamics in ourselves and our families and the world. We just live blind. So we're coded in this really just distorted, almost kind of dirty, unhealthy lens or set of lenses, and we don't even know they exist. Okay, now we recognize, okay, this is just a lens. I can look at this another way. That's about maybe, 85%, 90% of the battle, getting to that point. Then it's like, okay, let me take this dirty lens off. That's maybe another 5%. And I think the other 5% is just, oh, now I have the freedom to choose my own lens? What? Like, I can write my own story? To a degree. Like, we can't go so far as to, like, completely ignore the roles of culture and the forces of oppression and, the, institutionalized sexism and racism and all of that. But with those awarenesses in place, yes, you can start to choose some of your own lenses. And it makes me think about, like, when you go to the eye doctor, and they put that big black machine in front of your face and they go click, click, what about now? Click, what about now? Click. I kind of use that metaphor with my clients a lot. Like, okay, let's click through. Let's try this lens on. What could you say to yourself about this situation? What other set of expectations could you begin to write for yourself? Even that in and of itself is like mind-boggling, because it's like, oh, wait, I wrote this set of expectations. Oh, this came from my mother. Oh, this came from my church. Oh, this came from my abusive boyfriend in high school. I had no idea. I thought this was just gospel truth. No, these are expectations that are part of the lens that we can start rewriting. But okay, so now it's starting to get a little more complex, right?
Yes.
Because now we got to take time. Now we've recognized there's such a thing as a lens. We've recognized we have the power to switch off of the dirty, distorted lens and begin to put new, clear lenses on. But now we have to do that with our body image and our sense of relationship and our sexuality. And right, the list goes on and on. So I'm oversimplifying this, of course, I guess, but I want to underscore that it is a long, can be arduous process. But wow, what a payout. What a payout when you get to a point to where you don't have to compare your looks to a standard that is from your mother or a magazine,
Yes.
or you don't have to. I mean, this is maybe a silly example, but I said a couple months, I don't know, a year or so back at work, I said the wrong thing. I made a bad choice. I made somebody angry, and they called me out on it, and they confronted me. And years prior, that would have been my undoing. I mean, I would have been probably physically sick, thinking like I messed up professionally. Well, that's actually happened a few times, a few times over the past years. I mean, I remember in the first 5 to 10 years of my career, if I would have, quote, messed up professionally, like gotten in trouble, so to speak, I mean, you might have just found me like with my steam coming out of my ears. Or I don't know. I would have just completely fallen apart.
Yeah.
But I took it. I recognized where I went wrong in one situation. And in one situation, I don't think I was in the wrong. I think it was the other person's issue completely. But I just took it. And I'm like, okay, I know my worth. I know the value that I've brought to this community or to this task. We can all have our own opinions, and you can believe whatever you want, and I'm okay with that. And as that lens was sort of sliding into place, it almost felt like the Twilight Zone. I was like, who is this person? What is going on right now? Why am I not falling apart and just completely coming unglued for the next, whatever, 6 weeks or whatever? But then it felt amazing. I'm like, oh, I have the choice to write this story. Okay. So, part of this is just good old fashioned CBT. But then I think with a little bit of sort of that recognition of maybe it's not always that easy, that there's some forces at work, and we can't take it slow. And the last thing I want to add to that is when I do start clients on this process of sort of changing their perspective in a very intentional way, the first thing I encourage them to do is use this skill on your process. Meaning, if this is slow and arduous and you find yourself going back to those dirty, distorted lenses, it's okay. That's normal. That's part. You can't beat yourself up in a process where you're trying to learn not to beat yourself up, right? That doesn't make any sense. So give yourself time. These new lenses are not going to get clear immediately. They're going to feel really clunky and really weird over time. And you might get some pushback. The people around you, your church, your workplace, your spouse, they may not like the new lens. They may not like the new messages you're sending yourself about, like I have the right to my feelings. What? That may blow some people's minds. So expect some pushback as you're rocking the boat. But again, the payoff, to get to that place of freedom where I get to have my feelings. I'm upset right now. I get to have my feelings. I get to mess up. I get to be human. And I'm not there yet perfectly, but I'm a whole lot closer there than I ever have been. And wow, is it a better place?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and when you get that lens on, it actually gives you a new voice too, right? That's kind of like what you're saying, right? It gives you a new voice. People may not be used to hearing that voice, but it may be the closest, it may be a lot closer to who you actually are or who you want to be, right? And so I like your message of, and I think it's really good for anybody to hear, which is don't give up on the voice when you encounter resistance.
Yes.
And then there's an experimental part of this too, right? It's like that thing that you talked about with the eye doctor clicking the lenses. It's like, is this one clear? Is this one clear? Is this one more clear? It's almost like a consistent pursuit to find what is clearest for you.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't just stop with a one and done, right? And that makes a lot of sense too, since the cultural expectations seem to shift. The underlying message of perfection seems to be the same, but the expectations themselves, I mean, you can just look at how dress has changed in the last 50 years, right? It's like, or how popular body shape has shifted in the last 50 years. You look at those things and it seems to be ever changing, and it's almost like, the culture is presenting a new lens, right? It's like, do I accept that lens? Do I challenge it? Do I experiment with something in the middle? Is there maybe something good here that I'm missing? It's I guess it's a sort of process that you have to tweak along the way, right?
And do I want to be along on that roller coaster, that
Mhm.
unpredictable roller coaster, or do I want to put the time and effort into crafting literally my own set of lenses, which, yes, is going to take more time and more trial and error and more conscious effort. But,
Wow.
you know, I would imagine most people would find the outcome to be much more, more preferable over, that roller coaster of just wearing the cultural lens that gets slapped on you.
Yeah, and what a wonderful way to empower women and not give and I really like your answer a lot, Chrissy, because it doesn't say, okay, so this is the lens you should use, right? It allows for diversity. It really does allow for diversity for women to be themselves instead of, the neighbor next door with the bikini and the kids in their little Orville Redenbacher or whatever. Is that the popcorn guy? No.
That's the popcorn guy.
Yeah.
Don't look at me.
Oh man, that just blew my cover there. I was thinking of Oshbagosh, but it came out with
right. See, as a man, you don't even have to know who Lily Pulitzer is, and you're fine with that.
Right? Yeah. Goodness, I know Target's major brands like Cat and Jack is pretty cool. Yeah, but you're right. You're definitely right. Well, that's I hope everybody listening to this really takes that to heart, the diversity of that perspective, and the forgiveness, right, of that perspective. Like the drill sergeant may have a hard time with that because it insists on grace, right? Like it insists on maybe a forgiveness too of some of those people that you listed, like my mom gave me this lens, or my abusive ex-boyfriend. It maybe calls for some grace in those areas so that you can move forward, or maybe acceptance is the better word, right? But I
kind of just an awareness, of where did these messages come from? Why am I buying into this?
Yes.
Is this my message? Test it out. And if it is your message, great, keep it. If it's not your schema, then customization is kind of the concept that I use a lot. You customize everything, every way that you look at the world, every way you think about yourself, every rule and expectation that you hold for yourself. Because when I think about the most miserable, neurotic people around me, it's the people who have boatloads of rules and expectations and standards and all these things, and they have no idea that they're there. Like they have no awareness or no hope or like no prayer that they could even challenge those things because it's just that's the way it is. What do you mean that this is just how we do it? No, you could choose. Just takes a little bit of work.
This is a lot like mindfulness in the sense of like recognizing impulse and training the brain to pick up on the sensations and changes in your body and, recognize thoughts that come up. But then also there's the added layer of, the history of your life and picking up, where some of these things might be stemming from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that awareness, man. I think it's a good. I have a daughter as well, Chrissy, and I'm always trying to. I guess as a father, I'm always trying to be aware, be mindful of the messages that little Emma June is getting from me, but also from culture, and I know that she's going to have quite a bit to navigate and be mindful of. I'm from your perspective, though, especially from a mother with a pretty from what I see in Facebook, like a pretty rock star daughter. How do you approach this idea of lens building with your daughter? Like, what are some of the more helpful things that you feel like you've implemented for her as a mother, and maybe even some of our listeners, things that could be said or done to really empower their daughters to develop their own unique lens?
Oh boy, I can't wait to hear my answer on this because whatever it is, I really need to implement it because I'm struggling. I'll have to go back and listen to what answer I gave, but I'm really struggling with this one. I think just at the age that we're at, she's 10, and so we're starting to hit some of those prepubescent sort of struggles. But the two things I think that are my mantras with her that I really try to keep in mind. The first one is the idea of validation of feelings. You get to have your feelings. I don't know how many times a day I say that. I say it to all my clients. I say it to myself. I say it to her. Then I say it again to everybody. You get to have your feelings. You get to have your feelings. So when she's upset, in my household, I've tried. I don't know that I've been perfect at this, but I try to implement. I try to teach my clients how to do this too. When it comes to a child or a teenager or whatever and their feelings, it's always okay. Amnesty for emotion, complete amnesty for emotion. Now, behavior, words that are said, you could say curse words are off limits. You can't throw things across the room. You can't slam the door, whatever it is. But if you say, I feel angry, I feel scared, I feel embarrassed, that is always okay. And I think a couple things that does is, number one, it teaches us, the adults, it gives us that skill, which is huge. And especially with men, I've noticed in culture that men tend to have what I call the anger straw. I have all these. I didn't realize I had all these like Logue-isms.
Hey, I'm digging it though. I'm gonna use them.
men tend to have the anger straw, and it's like the culture has only allowed them to do one emotion, and so it's anger. And so it's like if I were to go like that and kind of blow breath, like it's diffuse and it's light. But if I go through a straw and go, and blow through a straw, it's a very like a harsher stream of air. So if men are only allowed to do their emotions through the anger straw, then of course that's how it always comes out in emotion. Well, then the boys and the girls, the children in our life, they see that. And the girls learn you don't provoke male emotion. And the boys learn, this is how I get my way in the world. This is how I express myself. So it becomes toxic for everyone. So if we in the family implement, you can have your feelings, then everyone wins. Daughter wins because she's going to have a lot of complex feelings that most people would teach her to stuff or have a fit about, like throw temper tantrums. Boys learn you can cry, like, oh my gosh, what damage are we doing to boys in our culture with the whole like, suck it up, be a man, don't cry, all that garbage. Dad learns how to set a better example and he's not so frustrated because he can do things other than anger. And again, everyone wins. So you get to have your feelings. I preach that in so many different ways. I use this book chapter from Anita Johnston's Eating in the Light of the Moon or Eating by the Light of the Moon.
Yeah.
Fabulous. I can't recommend that highly enough. That chapter on feelings where she tells a story about how she just, started feeling something and she thought it was ridiculous. I'm having a good day. Everything's fine. But you know what? I'm just going to play this out and let it see where it goes. She goes in her bedroom and just has a all out crying, screaming fit and then figures out like, oh, this was wrong. But she would have never gotten to that had she not let herself have her feelings. Feelings are not the bad guy. They're never dangerous. There's no real price to pay. They're like a gas. If you squash it and repress it, it can get pressurized and explosive. But if you open the lid and let it dissipate, that's exactly what it'll do. It'll float away. That's how emotions work. So, secondly, the other thing that I think I try to do is, this is the part I'm really struggling with because we just had this conversation last night. She's getting into the whole like, but what if I embarrass myself? What if I make a fool of myself? What if I mess up? What if people don't like me? What, just that typical sort of teenage embarrassment phobia thing. But I think she has a little more anxiety, so it may be a little bit more to deal with. And the approach I've been taking is not working because I'm taking the whole like, believe in yourself and tell yourself it's okay. And who are they? And what, I'm trying to kind of go the CBT route, but she's just not quite ready for that. And so I think what I'm finding is probably working better is not necessarily drilling that into her head with words because then I just get pushback. I think I'm just going to have to show her, just model it. Like, if I need to make a fool of myself, because she's embarrassed of stuff I do all the time. I'm going to keep doing it and just show her. Like, I don't really get, like, she's like, Mom, you're the only adult who rides her bike around the neighborhood. I'm like, okay, that's fine. She's like, you look ridiculous. I'm like, okay. Or I'll put on something and she's like, you're going to wear those shoes with that? I'm like, yep. I think I just have to model it in what I say and what I do. The fact that I don't care if I live up to other people's standards or, she told me the other day, she's like, I think you're getting a little fat. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like that's kind of a rude thing to say. Don't say that to other people, but it's fine. Like I just, because in my life that was never modeled for me. What was modeled for me was like, I'm not going to that party because I don't have anything to wear, and everybody, that kind of stuff. Or no, I don't want to go to the pool with you guys because I don't want to put on a bathing suit. It was just like all those internal embarrassments and shames and all that crap we heap on ourselves. It was not only said to me like overtly, but it was modeled for me. So that's the thing that I think I'm really trying to do with her is just model, like, I'm happy to make a fool out of myself. I'm happy to not live up to everybody else's standards, even yours, fine. I'll embarrass you. No problem. And we won't die. We won't die. We'll be fine. So those are the two things that I'm really working on right now.
Yeah. Well, those are, I mean, they really naturally seem to play off of each other too, in the sense that, like, you're allowed to have your emotions. Not only that, you get to play them out. Like you get to operationalize them almost, like if you go in your room and cry, or we talk this out a little bit. Yeah. And then you also get to have your reaction. That's where I think the second piece comes in, from what I've heard from my clients who are women, is like, okay, that's the leg that seems to be missing, is the empowerment that, okay, like, your emotion may be actually informing you of something that you want and desire and need. And it's actually okay for you to do that thing regardless of whether anybody else is going to think it's quote unquote like silly or stupid, or you shouldn't be doing that, right? It's almost like the emotion it's allowed to inform you, but gosh, you're so right about this straw thing where the male gets mad. The female, the girl learns like, hey, I don't want to provoke that, so I'll keep my emotions off the table. But what that does, and from that perspective, the one you're bringing is almost like it stunts the ability to develop yourself, because emotions are useful too, right? They're
guideposts. Absolutely. They're guideposts. It's a ventilation system. They're so not the bad guys we've made them out to be. We just don't know how to use them.
One of the things I try to convey to my clients is that, you wouldn't deny yourself of feeling happy. It's not like, oh, I'm happy, I want to go drown myself in work. Right. So, and obviously you're happy for a reason. Something's come up in your life that, you're awesome, you're happy, but same thing with sadness or anger or grief or anything, just notice it, let it ride. It's coming up for a reason, and don't try to handicap those things, because you might learn something about the process or the season that you're in.
That's right. It may have something to teach you, and it may strengthen you along the way so that you can then go take action on those gut feelings. You can validate your feelings through actions when you deem it to be right. And who cares if somebody doesn't like it? A client told me the other day, it was something she was wanting to ask for, or something. She was like, oh, but I can't say it like that because my husband will get mad. And I'm not talking about like an abusive situation or anything, but she was just like, I can't say it like that because my husband will get mad. And I went, and? I was like, but he'll get mad. Yeah. Okay. Well, but he'll be so frustrated at me. Okay. I mean, and I said, I'm not trying to be flippant, but I mean, let's pick this apart. Like, he can have his feelings. He can be mad. She was like, well, I never thought of that because I just thought I was if he was mad, I was messing up. Right. So that was the underlying lens that had come from who knows where, that we then had to kind of put all this together and say, listen to your feelings are telling you something. You have a need or a want or an urge. I can't remember what it was. You want to speak it. And if it makes him mad, that's okay. He can have his feeling too. It doesn't mean that your gut was wrong or that you made a bad move. And in fact, this type of free-flowing, uninhibited communication just might strengthen your relationship, as opposed to this inhibited, stilted, mind-reading eggshell. Is that really the relationship you want? She's like, no.
Wow. Oh, man. Yeah, that opens all kinds of possibilities in the relationship too. And from an empowerment standpoint, it also removes the woman in this situation from also being the mediator of the anger, right? Yes, the caretaker almost, like, constantly, he's angry, let me pacify this, or let me do something about it, versus a man actually taking ownership of his process, right? It's like that I could see where that provides a good bit of freedom, where it's like, yeah, he's just let him be, let him be angry. Of course, there are situations, right? Abusive situations where would want to be careful with letting that play out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But this, I think, generally applies. And it's a really enlightened perspective, Chrissy. I'm really glad we're having this conversation. And, it makes me curious too, because from my perspective, and I feel like I have, when we worked together at the counseling center, and when I had you as a professor, I feel like you really did model these things personally. I don't know your inner dialogue with this stuff, but you really did exemplify these things. And I was watching last night. I don't know if you've seen it. I absolutely, not even closet about it, love Beyonce. I think
I haven't seen it.
I think she walks on water. But anyway, she just released her Coachella. She performed at Coachella in 2018, and it was like a year after she gave birth to twins, and she did a 2-hour set with almost 40 songs in it.
Oh my gosh.
And so she talked about her process and the difficulties of being a mother through that, the difficulties of being a woman, and also the difficulties of being a Black woman trying to do this. She's actually the first Black woman to ever headline Coachella.
Wow.
And so her perspective on this, and I get this, her perspective, the whole entire thing, she brought in young Black men and women from historically Black universities. And they were her performers. They were her musicians. They were her dancers. I mean, she pulled her culture on stage, and her goal was to present Black culture on the stage and to be a conduit, right? And it really made me think about this conversation, because, like, from this perspective that you're bringing, I mean, that you talk about a conduit to empower women to be themselves, and to define things for themselves. Like, I look at Beyonce and what she did on that larger scale, but there are ways, I think, that as men we could do this, as women we could do this. There's a mentorship. There's like a mentorship aspect to this, where you're connecting with other people even in your own culture, race, sex, gender, however you want to define those things. Like, so from your perspective, what is the importance of female to female mentorship, and do you see any obstacles to this in regards to modern culture?
Yeah, I think as you were giving that Beyonce example, it hit me just how easy and natural it is to pull other people up with you when you take on some of these perspectives. Because the whole, kind of back to that idea of like the backbiting and the jealousy and the competition, I don't think any of us, most people are not doing that intentionally and with malicious, evil intent. Most people are just doing that out of a place of such chaotic insecurity that's just how it ends up looking, because they're just living in a survival of the fittest mode.
Yes.
But and I'm not saying that I have this perfected by any means, but I feel like you in particular have given me so many compliments that I felt were almost like unwarranted, unearned, but it made me think more consciously, because I was doing this subconscious or unconsciously, I guess. You talked about how like compliments roll off my tongue. Like, I just naturally build people up, and that's my first sort of perspective on somebody. And like with mentoring new professionals or interns or supervisees or students, none of that was like put on or forced. And I guess that's why the compliments feel a little like awkward, because it's like, oh, I didn't even mean to do that. It was like I wasn't even trying.
Yes.
But I think when you take on an internal sense of strength and empowerment and ability to switch those lenses out, ability to kind of ward off some of the cultural negativity and expectations and forces, then you just naturally begin to bring other people with you, because you don't see them as competition. You're not threatened by them. I think somebody even said this to me, like about how we were bringing people up through the ranks at the counseling center. People are like, well, aren't you afraid, some of those people are going to take your job? I'm like, I would love it if they would take my job. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm not afraid of this.
Yes.
And so I guess specifically with the female to female mentorship, when a person does maybe make it to sort of that next level of awareness, of the ability to start switching out the lenses, I don't know. At least for me, it just came naturally. So maybe it's just a matter of like, when you get to that place, be thankful for that level of healing, and then just begin to let it flow naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let the old mindset of like, well, maybe I won't do it right enough, or maybe I won't do it good enough. Because believe me, those thoughts haunted me many times in terms of like all the trainees and the students and the various people that, that I've kind of had the privilege of being able to mentor. Don't let those old thoughts haunt you, and just kind of keep going with where you've come. And then people will it will just naturally happen. Like you were literally, I get that mental image of Beyonce like lifting people up on the stage with her. Like, I think it just naturally begins to happen. And so I think the main obstacles to it are just not getting ourselves to that place of healing, because you can't start to mentor other people when you're still fighting your own demons. But then you get yourself on the road to healing. And then I think that it's kind of like a Carl Rogers thing. So once you get that out of the way, like it'll start flowing naturally. You don't have to do anything to make it happen other than just let it happen.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sitting with that. I mean, that's that I think puts it beautifully, because it becomes an outpouring at that point, or it's like maybe you start to see, maybe you're in a position now where you start to see that other people would like to feel like you do, even if that's sort of subconscious, or maybe I've seen this maybe in myself too, where having come up under your mentorship, I think there were certain insecurities that you spoke to in my life and sort of built me up in, and when I don't know that I even realized they were insecurities at the time until we started talking through them. But now those are things I think that just I sort of naturally see in others too. So like when you bring that awareness to yourself and you improve in those areas, you almost are able to see that in the people around you, and you can provide that mentorship, right? You actually see that there's a need, even if it's subconscious, right? Like what you said, it's like encouragements did naturally flow out of you. I mean, I remember I did a website for your career class, and that, I mean, I think it was like 2 years. Oh no, it was in the hiring process, in our interview. You said, I remember that website that you did for the for the career class. Like you recalled that, and you praised me for it. And I walked out of that interview feeling like, man, like that. If I don't get this job, I'm super encouraged.
Like, you feel good about it, not getting the job.
Well, yeah. It's like I feel good about the interview anyway. I would have probably been bummed that I didn't get the job, but I did feel super encouraged by that. So that's a really cool perspective, Chrissy. And
the cool thing about perspective is that once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
So like once you climb up on that stand and look down over the corn maze, it's like you might jump back down into the corn maze every now and then, but you're not going to forget that stand is there, that the different perspective doesn't exist. You can't unknow that. And so I think as you take this healing journey, as a man or woman, either one, just these ideas of self-empowerment, validating your feelings, listening to your gut, as you do all those things, you can't unknow what you've accomplished. You may stumble, you may have bad days, but you can't unknow that stuff. And so then when people come around you who maybe haven't had those experiences yet, you just exude it. You just find, like you said, you may ask the question or offer the perspective, not from a preachy advice giving sort of like, oh, I've been there and let me tell you how to fix this, but just your interactions will exude that awareness that you can't I mean, it's kind of like the whole thing where we talk about, once you become a therapist, it's very difficult to turn it off, and that's a huge occupational hazard. So like on an airplane, I have to be really careful not to open my mouth, because it will turn into a 3-hour therapy session. Or at the DMV back in the old school days where you had to sit in the chair and then move down, right, for like 4 hours. Oh my gosh, that woman, I knew her entire life story just because I think I probably said like, oh, that sounds really tough, and like, the floodgates open.
It's true.
It's really hard to undo those skills. So I think it's the same thing with all of this. Once you get on the road to self-acceptance, validation, empowerment, you can't unknow it, and then it just exudes around you, to all the people around you.
Absolutely. To even tack onto that, it may be harder to regress, or at least you see yourself regressing if you do, right? So one of the things that I really like that Beyonce said in this, I'm going to go back to Queen Bee, but one of the things I really liked that she said in this documentary is that she chose to be herself and reveal her struggles through the process instead of putting on her
Yes.
flower crown, right? That's actually the wording
Nice.
she used. Instead of putting on my flower crown as the first Black woman to do Coachella and get up here and just, be perfect. Like,
Yeah.
I'm actually going to do this documentary and let you know the struggles that I went through to actually get here, right? And put on this
Absolutely.
performance. And I think
Well, I
that's,
mean,
yeah.
Brene Brown has made an empire on that message. I
Uh-huh.
mean, she's built an empire on that message of like,
Yes.
just lay it all out there. Just be
Mm-hmm.
raw,
Mm-hmm.
dirty, broken,
Mm-hmm.
shameful. Like,
Yes.
like, why are we hiding? Like,
Mm-hmm.
stop.
Yes.
It's not worth it anymore.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a good message for, for women and men to hear, right? Because
Yes.
I think, and that was a question I wanted to kind of bring up for you in regards to that. If you could challenge 1, 2, 3, maybe more, but maybe for time's sake, just 1 or 2 really unhelpful patterns of male thinking in regards to female empowerment and assertiveness. And if you want to reference something you've already said, that's fine as well. How would you encourage us as males to view things or do things a little or a lot bit differently? Like, I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah. So my answer to that question is slightly different than what you asked. So instead of saying like, here's an unhelpful way or a pattern of thinking, or, here's a stereotype, stop thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I would say is start thinking.
Oh.
Start thinking, period. Right? Because that brings us back. So I'm not going to be so brazen as to try to pick out like, oh, that thought process is wrong and that doesn't apply because I don't know, maybe that's too detailed and too nitpicky. It just in general, what I would say is just start thinking, whether you want to call it mindfulness, conscious living, any of those terms. It's how can we just start to become more aware? Because then if we add more awareness to the equation, now we can tackle the crippling insecurity. Now we can tackle the anger straw. Now we can tackle the mental load equation differential, right? All those things for the most part. Now, sure, there are people who, have their own attitudes and issues or whatever. But I think for the most part, if you just look at the average person who's trying to do well and have a healthy relationship and all that, it's not so much of active negative thinking that's the problem. It's just not thinking, right? It's that lack of awareness of all these processes and all these unspoken sort of insidious pressures and expectations and unwritten rules and all of that. So one of my favorite stories that I was hoping I'd find a way to work this in. I know we're short on time, but you guys have probably heard this in many of my classes, but it's the story of the burnt toast, right? So if you take the average stereotypical, there's always exceptions, but if you take the average stereotypical American family, mom, dad, brother, sister, and the toast is made in the morning and one piece comes out burnt. Who eats the burnt toast? Who eats the burnt toast? I mean, most people would agree. On average, the stereotypical answer would be, well, mom. Of course, mom eats the burnt toast. Now, again, there's always exceptions, of course. But the burnt toast is such a classic example of everybody in that equation is doing that mindlessly. Nobody is setting out to hurt anybody, to be selfish. It's all just a mindless, kind of just unconscious. Well, of course, mom eats the burnt toast, but look at the dynamics. Look at the what messages is this sending to everybody? It robs dad of the ability to maybe step up and feel good to sacrifice every now and then, and to show brother that women's job is not to always take care of you and make things comfortable and pleasant for you. That it's okay to put yourself second. It shows sister that you don't have to always take the short end of the stick to make men happy, and that you don't have to put your needs aside or to eat toast that you don't want to eat, or whatever. It shows mom that you can speak up and it's okay not to like the burnt toast, and it's okay to burn the toast. Maybe burnt toast is not that bad, right? So everybody wins in that equation. And maybe 1/4 of the time mom still eats the burnt toast, but maybe the other 1/4 of the time sister eats the burnt toast, maybe the other 1/4 of the time brother, etc., right? And so it is not to bash anybody in that equation or to say that anybody set out to do that maliciously. It's to help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
When everybody mindfully thinks like, oh, whose turn is it to eat the burnt toast? Then everybody wins.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What a great note to kind of wrap everything up with, Chrissy. I mean, I think that really encapsulates a lot of what you're saying, and really an overall message of awareness.
Yes.
It's a lot of awareness, and if there's some fellas listening to this, I know that one of the things that I can offer from my perspective, both as a counselor, but also as a father, as a male, as a son, I've been in all the male roles that I think that a male could be in. Not every male is a therapist, though, that's for sure. But one of the ways that you can start thinking is to start asking questions. And questions are a great way for you to have something to think about. So it might be asking a woman in your life, like, how does this affect you? Right. Yep. It's like by positioning yourself curiously, you actually are able to be aware and actually challenge norms.
That's right.
I think
curiosity over defensive-ness. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
And actually
that
listen.
would be beautiful.
Yeah. And listen.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's good stuff. It's good stuff, Chrissy. I really, we really appreciate your time on this. And, I hope that, everybody is able to pull something from this. I know I've pulled a lot from this. I don't know about you, Andrew.
Me too.
Oh, my goodness. Certainly a lot to think about. And, yeah, so man, maybe sometime in the future have you back on again if we didn't bore you on our side.
Oh, absolutely. It's really cool to get to just pull some things together, because in a session you have to be so careful and not go into a mini lecture.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's little breadcrumbs and little tidbits here and there, but it is kind of fun to pull all these concepts together at once. And I was actually worried that I wouldn't have much to say, but shocker.
Yeah. Oh man, no, you had plenty of awesome stuff to say. Plenty. And well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Again, Chrissy, thank you so much for your time on this. And for everybody listening, we'll put out another podcast in the next couple of weeks. The content's to be determined at this point, but we have some conversations around the Enneagram that are likely going to happen in the next couple months with our therapist Wesley Nichols. He started an Enneagram movement in Chattanooga, and so we're super fortunate to have him on staff and really be able to pick his brain on the Enneagram, which is a very popular tool everybody's using nowadays. So again, Chrissy, thanks so much for being on with us, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Absolutely. So proud of you all and all the work you're doing. Thanks for having me.
You have been listening to The Counselor's Chair, sponsored by Traverse Counseling Services. For more information, visit our website at www.traversecounselingservices.com or email us at contact@infotraverse.com. Thank you again for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time. This podcast was recorded and produced by Josh Zello.